Hello and welcome to this episode of Akrinos Access. I'm your host, Eric Matei, joined today by a very exciting guest, Dr. Thomas Quinn. And Dr. Quinn is here to have a conversation about some really incredible breakthroughs on the front of clinical investigatorship and how doctors across the US can get involved in becoming a clinical investigator. Now, if Dr. Quinn's name sounds familiar, well, Dr. Quinn's been around clinical investigatorship and the American Academy of Optometry for many, many years. And so again, couldn't be more excited to welcome Dr. Quinn here for this very special episode of Akrinos Access. Dr. Quinn, hello, welcome to the program.
Greetings, Eric. Thanks for the opportunity to share the information and enthusiasm for clinical research.
Absolutely. Well, look, let's go ahead and get started. I would love for you to share with our viewers just a little bit about your professional journey and how you've come to this point.
Yeah. Well, let me first say that the idea of optometry never occurred to me until I went as a senior in high school to get my eyes examined, and my optometrist suggested, "Have you ever thought of optometry?" And I said, "No." Well, he gave me a book, and the rest is history. So I understood the power of making that suggestion. And over the years of practice, I've tried to promote optometry to smart young people that come through the office, and I've borne some fruit from that. At any rate, once I decided on optometry, I went to the Ohio State University College of Optometry, and then I did a cornea and contact lens residency program, Eric, which at the time was only one of two residency programs in the country, the other one being Berkeley. And my program was a 2-year program, which involved doing a master's project, a master's in physiological optics. And that's when I first dipped my toe in clinical research and found it so interesting and exciting that it's been part of my life ever since. After doing my residency, I taught at Ohio State full time for a couple of years, and then got married and established practice in Athens, Ohio, with my wife, Dr. Susan Quinn. And we've been doing many, many studies over those 40 years. Keeping our fingers in clinical research.
Love it. Love it. And, you know, there's something that I think is very inspiring there. And that's how, from the very beginning of your private practice journey, clinical research was going to be a part of it, right? Because as you shared, Dr. Quinn, I mean, you know, at the time you going through a residency program at the time where there was one of only 2 residency programs across the US, you know, it instilled with you a deep passion for the clinical side and the research side. And so what really inspired you, though? You know, typically when doctors get into private practice, they kind of sometimes get away from some of the hardcore clinical elements, some of the research elements. So what inspired you coming out of the blocks to take that leap of faith, right? Because I mean, if you're going to say, "Hey, I'm a clinical investigator," and use that to kind of like promote and grow your practice, share with us a little bit about how that unfolded.
Well, Eric, you bring up a great point. It was largely to help promote the practice. My wife and I hung up our shingle just cold. No one knew us in the community we moved to. So how can we differentiate ourselves? One of the ways was by doing clinical studies. And it's an area that I felt comfortable in doing. And then gave prestige to the practice, that hopefully communicated that I knew what I was doing if I was doing studies. And it was an additional stream for funding. I mean, money. You know, if you do it right, it can be financially beneficial. So all those reasons made sense to do it.
Fantastic. So why don't we jump into then some of these structural components, right? So when we're talking about you know, incorporating clinical investigation into private practice, obviously there are some accommodations here. It's going to impact operations, certainly going to impact practice economics. And while I'm sure we could probably devote a full hours-long episode or conversation on each of these, perhaps maybe at a high level, you know, what are some things that you realized early on? Okay, if we're gonna make this work, we need to be sure that we kind of stick to these principles and these functions. Because if I'm not mistaken, you've shared with me prior to going live here, you've been a part of more than 1 or 2 investigations over your career. You've been involved in a ton of projects. So, at a high level, what are some of those things that a practice really needs to have in place if they want to adopt clinical investigatorship into the scope?
Eric, there's some key things that need to be in place. One is you need to have a patient base that makes sense for the study you're exploring doing. So, if you want to do a study on presbyopic contact lenses and you have a practice that's based on pediatric care, that's not going to work, right? So, you got to have that. Then you have to get your staff on board that this is going to be a piece of the puzzle that we offer here. And once you have the staff on board, then you need to select someone who is your main go-to. So the in-office coordinator is key, arguably more
Mm,
important than I am as a principal investigator. In my case, it's always been a woman, and she's always been very detailed, very efficient, very responsive, and those are qualities you need in a clinical coordinator in the office. So those are the key components of setting yourself up for success. One other piece of the puzzle is you need to have the right equipment. You need to have a place to store your study materials that is away from and can be put in a locked space, for example.
sure, sure. Yeah. So absolutely, you hit on a few critical pieces. I think the first of which is patient population, right? And to consider how your practice in practical terms would be a good site. And I think also perhaps here, Dr. Quinn, it's important to point out that as we were discussing prior to going live, any practice in any town in America could be a candidate for clinical investigatorship. It's a matter of finding the right projects, the right needs that's going to fit that patient demographic. Those patients that are coming through. So I think that's such a critical piece as far
Can
as the
I hop
starting
on
point. The
that,
other thing you
Eric? Can
mentioned,
I hop on that for a
please,
minute? Because that's such a
absolutely,
key point. There's a lot of practitioners that think that industry partners want academic settings to do the studies. That's not necessarily the case. In fact, right now, I know there's a great push within industry to look for private practitioners because they're trying to open up the population that they're exposing their test product to a general population. They don't want to
sure.
have it just in academic settings. Plus, when you work with an academic setting, there's some extra hoops that you have to go through if you're an industry sponsor that you do not have to go through if you're working with someone who's in private practice. So private practices have some real appeal to industry partners who are looking for collaboration.
That's really great to hear because, well, I got to say, I think it's so vital because certainly in strictly academic research settings, at times there may be controls in place that, to your point, Dr. Quinn, are I'm not going to say not real world, but there are certain controls that are in place that absolutely what we want is we want more of a general populace part of that sample size. And by the way, I know I'm barely scratching the surface of this. I don't pretend to be, and those that know me well know that I don't pretend to be an investigator. I'm not a researcher, other than when it comes to finance and financial statements. Let's get it on, right? But as far as clinical investigatorship, really fascinating stuff. So let's build on that. Talking about industry, you mentioned a moment ago that industry is looking for more private practice test sites. And perhaps this is also maybe a nice segue into the incredible things that are going on at the academy and the CIC program and stuff. So maybe we'll start with talking about right now, as it stands, Dr. Quinn, industry, finger on the pulse of industry. What is the need for investigatorship? And then maybe we can transition into talking about what you guys are leading at the academy to provide these connections and really take optometry and research to the next level.
Eric, there's so much going on that anybody that's paying any attention at all that they appreciate. There's so much going on in eye care right now in terms of therapeutic treatments, in terms of myopia management, in terms of specialty contact lens design, which is where my emphasis has been. There's a great need for clinical investigators, and that's what pushed us partly to develop the clinical investigator certification program at the Academy. If I can give you a little more background on that,
Absolutely, please.
a number of years ago, Dr. Barbara Caffrey was president of the Academy. we formed a task force, and I was invited to be part of it because of my experience in clinical practice investigation. How to get Academy Fellows or people on the front lines of providing patient care involved in clinical research. And that's where this CIC program was born. And it was established in 2021. And we now have 111 graduates from 29 states and 8 countries. It is a process that you have to apply for, Eric. It's not something that you can just say, I want to do it and pay some money. And by the way, in terms of cost, it's very minimal. And if cost is an issue, we offer scholarships. So money should not be a factor. There is an application process. And by the way, applications will be open for the next session in mid-January of 2024 for the session that's going to take place during March and April. Maybe it's a good time, Eric, to talk about that. It's an 8-week course.
Sure.
One night a week. Usually it's been Tuesday. Spend about an hour and a half talking about a given topic. And I can go into the details of what those are if you want me to. But we take a pretty deep dive into how clinical studies should be carried out. So now you're a knowledgeable person. So when industry is looking for an investigator, they can come to CIC graduates and know that they know what they're talking about.
That's incredible. So what we're doing here, what you guys have created here is both a certification program to take those fellows of the academy that want to become certified investigators and really make clinical investigatorship a part of their scope, right? You're providing them with a program so that to take their competencies and abilities to the next level, but also you're now becoming a source for industry, right? Because I mean, industry at any given time, I mean, right now as we're recording this, I think back to the Academy meeting last month down here in New Orleans and think of how many incredible things are going on in industry. So what you guys have also had here is now industry is coming after you guys, knowing that you can connect us with qualified investigators to get our studies done.
Yeah, so we've actually just at the Academy meeting in New Orleans launched the American Academy of Optometry Foundation Clinical Investigator Database. And it's going to be not only CIC graduates, but we're also opening up the database to those who have done clinical studies but want to be part of the database to be accessible for industry partners. So there is a few qualifications to be part of the database. First of all, you have to be a fellow. Secondly,
Sure.
if you consider yourself an experienced investigator, you have to have served as principal investigator or sub-investigator on at least 3 studies over the last 7 years. And then you have to have CITI certification. That is good practices for dealing with human subjects. And we offer the ability to get that training through this application process if you don't already have it. If you do qualify, then you take a proof of proficiency. I don't like to use the word test, a proof of proficiency to make sure you know what you're talking about when it comes to conducting clinical investigations. And once you pass that, then you can enter your information into the database. I think you have the link for the proof
I
of
do.
proficiency.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get that up here. It's going to be so it can be accessed from AO.org, but the direct URL is AAO-learning.org/courses/CICPOP. And by the way, those that may be listening, you can find the link at the Akrinos website if you're finding the rebroadcast there. Dr. Quinn,
I just want to make sure that people understand that this link is for someone who feels that they are a qualified investigator and want to skip over the CIC training course. So if you're an experienced investigator, this is the link you want to go to. If you're interested in the CIC course, then just go to the Academy website, AAO. There you go. Thank you, Eric. You're slick. And then click on that and type in the clinical investigator certification course. And again, applications will be accepted mid-January.
Yeah. Dr. Quinn, it really is such an exciting time right now in optometry, because with this rapidly growing public health need for vision, medical, specialty eye care, we look at that and we look at the growing scope of optometry and optometry's role in the patient life cycle. And it's just absolutely remarkable. And the work that you guys are doing at the Academy and with the CIC program and all the incredible things going on at the American Academy of Optometry, just really exciting to be a part of this and help promote this, help to get this out there. So, this has been a really great conversation, Dr. Quinn, and I know we could probably go ad nauseum, keep the conversation going on some really fascinating things. But maybe as we kind of pull things together, we'd like to get your closing thoughts, right? As being someone who, started very early on research, being a part of your early career after your residency, but then venturing into entrepreneurship and the world of private practice and keeping investigatorship a part of it. And now, look, if we go down the accolades and the things you're involved in these days, I mean, your work with the AOA's contact lens and cornea section, serve on that council, past chair of the EastWest Eye Conference. You're on the board, educational board with Vision Expo, and associate director of the Gas Permeable Lens Institute, and just all these amazing things you're a part of throughout your career. Maybe you can kind of give us a send off as you see the future going from here, right? In us getting the next generation engaged and empowered. So please just share your thoughts.
Well, Eric, I think clinical research is not only interesting, adds variety, can add to the bottom line, allows you to work with products before they're on the market, and all those things. Doing clinical research sets optometry apart from just being a technician position. If you ask the questions and then come up with your own answers, that, in my mind, is how you define yourself as a profession. So that's how passionate I am about clinical research, and I hope others will get on board. And if you've thought about doing it but have been hesitant, I hope this conversation today helps push you to go ahead and move forward and get involved. Thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts on this, Eric.
Yeah, Dr. Quinn, thank you again so much for coming on the show and sharing the amazing things that you guys are doing, but also sharing your journey, right? Because it's trailblazers like you that have set the stage for optometry where it is now and the trajectory it's moving along. For our viewers out there, if you would like to connect with Dr. Quinn, if I'm not mistaken, I think folks can connect with you through the AAO website.
They can.
A way to connect with you. So head on over to aao.org. If you'd like to continue the conversation with Dr. Quinn, if you're looking to incorporate clinical investigatorship into your practice, absolutely check out the amazing things that the Academy is doing in conjunction with their CIC program. And well, Dr. Quinn, again, thank you so much for joining us here on this very special episode of Akrinos Access.
Thank you, Eric.
And on behalf of all of us here at Akrinos,